Greetings, it is I, Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, welcome. It is time to continue our discussion on the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons, 5th edition D&D. I've been talking about being a dungeon master and developing your own campaigns and game worlds and some of the information you need to know about. Let's dive back into that. Let's talk about some information on their campaigns and giving it to your players. Your players, it might be good for you to build some kind of handout to grant them, to help them get information on the story. You would supply them with any kind of restrictions on races, classes, anything like that, anything you're restricting because it's not appropriate in your world. You'll provide a little bit of background information they might know about the world, a little bit of history that might be important to the game, what location they're starting in, any kind of important places in that location, like important buildings in a town, important NPCs. Keep it short and concise as much as possible. Maximum of 2 pages worth of information. I would not go beyond that, so you're not flooding them with too much information. Now, you can include your characters' backgrounds in your story. Now, a lot of times, their backgrounds might just organically built in with the information you provided to them, but you can dive into it more and include some of their backgrounds by asking them a number of questions. First, you have to find out if they have any family that are left in the area. Ask them that. What kind of occupation they have. Is the family that you might have here still here? Now, if they are recent additions to this area, where did they come from? Why did they come here? Also, if there are any factions and organizations that you've added into this area, do they have any kind of relation to those? And are they friend or foe to that one? You will talk to your players and find out what they want to do, and you will tell them yes or no if that would be appropriate. If you think something is appropriate, let them know. If you don't think it's appropriate, also let them know. Don't have them do that. You're working with them to build their background and make it appropriate to the world you're building. Now, if you think it's appropriate to your campaign, you could make up your own background. There are rules that I'll talk about in a later episode for building your own background, but effectively, if you think it's appropriate and adding it in, and one of your players might want to have it, then come up with something. Put it in there. Suggest it to players that might want to play it in order to add a little bit more to their characters in the setting. Now, that's just some ways of tying your characters into the story and making it more interesting and more personal for some of your characters that you're able to do. Let's move on from there and talk about major events or world-shattering events in general. Events that happen that alter the course of both the story and the world you're in. You might want to use them appropriately in order to change up things for your characters and for the game. Events are going to be important regardless. Events are going to change what happens in the game for your characters. How world-affecting that is, if it's world-shattering for their world personally or world-shattering for the entire world, is entirely up to you. You could just have it that it's a world-shattering event that shatters their perceptions of their own world. Keep these major events restricted to like 3 effective times at most. One at the beginning of your game, one at the middle of the game, and one at the end of the game. That's effectively using them in proper storytelling. Putting too many of these major events into your game will bog it down too much. Now, depending on how you're telling the story, if you're telling it in adventures, you might want to keep that per adventure, or if you're telling it in an overall massive campaign, then you would keep that in that formula also. Now, the book does provide some information on different types of world-shattering events, gives you a little bit of information about using each of those. So if you want to use one, look it up. And this is again saying you can still use smaller events in between these in order to keep the storyline going. Now let's talk about the passage of time, because it actually can be very important in your game world. It's suggested that you keep dates similar to whatever dates you have in the world. Now, you can come up with your own calendar and however you want to build it, but keep the date in your calendar mimicking whatever date the day is that you start with. From then on, you would keep track of time. If the players will go farther ahead in time than whatever time period you're playing the game is, that's perfectly fine. You're going to want to keep track of seasons, any kind of solstices or equinox, maybe the phases of the moon or moons, see how they factor into everything. If there are any important deities, usually they have at least one festival per year. Maybe you want to include those festivals in. So when you're keeping track of time like this, you could say, oh, it's festival time in X days. If my players are here, it'll be during a festival. If they have managed to miss that, then hey, they missed the festival. But it gives options to give the world a little bit more life knowing this information. Or if there's any other important dates that may be related to a kingdom they're in or anything like that, keep them on the calendar, keep track of them, especially if they be coming up in your calendar year. Now you also have to ask things, how is your calendar keeping track of it? Does it just have days similar to the Roman calendar, which we use now? Does it track the phases of the moon, and a month is a phases of the moon? Or It could be like certain regular magical phenomena might be used to base their calendar off of. Now, other important things, if there is any unusual or strange magical phenomena that happens once a year, maybe you want to list that. Like, during X point in time of the year, the mystical haunted castle appears on the mountainside and you can enter into it. But be careful that you don't stay there or you'll be trapped forever. Something like that. So, when you're playing your campaign, you can go to whatever level you want to before you end your current campaign or your current campaign of characters. You can go to 20, but that's also not just the only option. You can choose where you end and where, either if you're switching players or you're having the players that you're continuing with them switching characters, when that would occur. Now it's up to you if you use another new campaign world, or you could use the same campaign world you were in before. Like, new characters, same world, and the effects of what your characters did before could change the story or what's going on in the world you're building now. So effectively, our previous heroes that we were in another life have now created great things in our world to change and affect the storyline as it's evolving for our new characters. So that's it for today. I went over some of the basics of campaign building, talking about giving handouts to people, including their backgrounds in the world and what it means to be part of the world for your characters, moving on to talking about the time period that your campaign might be involved in and what it means to switch to other characters in the same campaign world. Next time, I'm going to start talking about playstyles your players might have that might affect how you're running your game and the types of fantasy you might want to do when you're choosing a campaign. If you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel, the empire, and the work I do. And until the next time, I bid you farewell.